like that.
Joining us now from Mountain View, California, is California senatorial candidate Carly Fiorina. Ms. Fiorina, we've been reporting on the events in Bell, California. We've been consistently reporting on this, and we're suggesting that it's a grassroots revolt that might spread against government workers and their salaries. Are we off the mark with that suggestion?
Well, no, I don't think you are. I think people have figured this out. Government jobs are paid for by taxpayers, unlike a private sector job that pays for itself. And so when people here in California who are struggling mightily with 12.3% unemployment see government workers for whom they pay making outrageous salaries, outrageous pensions and benefits, of course they're angry. Of course they're disappointed. They have every right to be.
Do you think President Obama is anti-business? I mean, there's a big debate on that subject as well these days.
Well, I think what we see is a whole set of policies that make it more difficult to do business. So you call that whatever you like, but let's just start with a stimulus bill paid for by taxpayers. Barbara Boxer has said it would create 400,000 jobs here in California. In fact, we have destroyed 400,000 more jobs in the last year and a half since the stimulus bill passed. In the last year alone, California had the highest year-over-year job loss of any state in the nation. 156,000 plus jobs were lost, and that's because bigger government, bigger bailouts, higher taxes, thicker regulations, people, not to mention a blanket of uncertainty, people can't do business in that environment. I don't care whether they're a very small business, a startup business, or a big business.
I know you're in a tight race. It's a vigorous race in politics in California at the moment. I sometimes find it hard to get real hard answers from candidates about the major issues of the day. So here's the major issue of the day that we've been dealing with on this program, as you know, and that is state worker pensions. A huge problem all across the country, California included. Can I ask you the hard question? What would you do about the pension problem in America today if elected?
Well, first let me say that I am obviously running for a federal office, not a state office.
Yep.
But the problem that you point out is epidemic across the nation, and we have it in federal government employees as well. My job as a U.S. Senator would be to immediately start cutting federal spending, and that means cutting federal workers. Yes, that's precisely what it means. And ultimately, we have to reform the pensions, the benefits of all of our public employees because they're out of step with what the private sector receives. We know now that public employees receive greater salaries, better pensions, and better benefits. And remember, you know this, but sometimes politicians forget it. Those things don't come free. The taxpayers are paying for those things. So we have to start cutting government spending, and that means cutting government workers, and ultimately we have to reform those entitlements.
Now, then you're running on the idea of cutting back on federal government spending. That is a plank
That's
in
right.
your platform. I put it to you, ma'am, that would impose severe pain across the country.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about the pain that's being imposed across the country. I am running on two fundamental issues: creating jobs in the private sector, which means we encourage, in particular, small business owners, innovators, and entrepreneurs, and yes, cutting spending. Federal government employees are growing at 14.5% this year. This while California deals with 12.3% unemployment. More and more private sector folks are losing their jobs, and the federal government is growing jobs at over 14%. Not only is that not right, it is going to bankrupt this nation. So yes, I am running on cutting federal spending and creating jobs that pay for themselves.
So if elected, you would vote against federal help for the states like California?
Yes, and in fact, Stuart, as you know, you and I have had this conversation before, and I've answered it exactly the same way. I would have voted against the bailout. I would have voted against the stimulus, and yes, I would vote against a bailout of California. Why? Because California, like the federal government, like Washington, D.C., like so many other states, has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. And the only way you get a spending problem under control is to actually hold people accountable for making the tough choices. That's what we need to do in Washington. It's what Barbara Boxer has failed to do for 28 long years.
Ms. Fiorina, always a pleasure to have you with us on the program. We appreciate you being here again.